Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and I'll just use what's left of my voice today. So I'm Camille Charles. I'm Director of the Center for Africana Studies, and I'm Professor of Sociology, Africana Studies, and Education here at the University of Pennsylvania. And as we get started, I'd just like to remind you all to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices, please. The Center for Africana Studies, in partnership with the Wharton Sports Business Initiative, welcomes you to our last program of the semester, our annual Race and Sports Lecture. This event is usually scheduled in conjunction with the Penn Relays. It was established in 2002 as a forum for informed discussions with prominent athletes, sports scholars, and journalists. This event has offered a forum for a wide range of and variety of participants, including Tina Sloan Green, Kellen Winslow, Todd Boyd, Harry Edwards, Stephen A. Smith, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos is actually a repeat guest, so we're happy to have him this evening, and also Marion Jones and most recently Katrina Adams from the USTA. Today we have the great privilege of welcoming four panelists who have all contributed to the intersections of race, sports, and activism. Preston Brown is currently the Dean of Cultural Climate and head football coach at Woodrow Wilson High School in Camden, New Jersey. As an undergraduate at Tulane, he served as team captain for 2 seasons and was inducted into the Tulane Athletic Hall of Fame in 2015. Mr. Brown moved into the professional football ranks, earning free agent tryouts with a few NFL teams before embarking on an Arena Football and United Football League careers. He decided to leave professional football to work with youth in his hometown of Camden in 2009. In addition, he's earned a master's degree in education with honors from American Intercontinental University. In September 2016, Mr. Preston gained national headlines when he and his Woodrow Wilson football players took a knee during the Star-Spangled Banner in protest of the current hostile racial climate. We also have, as I said, John Carlos, who is the bronze medal winner in the 200 meters at the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City. His raised black-gloved fist on the podium, along with teammate Tommy Smith, brought international attention to the human and civil rights struggle. John Carlos is a former track and field athlete and professional football player and a founding member of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. He won the bronze medal, as I said, in the 200 meters at the 1968 Olympics. He went on to equal the world record in the 100-yard dash and beat the 200-meter world record. After his track career, he's enjoyed brief stints in the National Football League and the Canadian Football League, but retired as a result of injury. He became involved in the U.S. Olympic Committee and helped organize the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Dr. Carlos was inducted into the USA Track and Field Hall of Fame in 2003. Anita DeFrantz is a University of Pennsylvania alumna, graduating in 1977 and earning her JD. She competed at the 1976 Montreal Olympics as a member of the U.S. Women's 8-oared shell, where she earned a bronze medal. Ms. DeFrantz won a silver medal for rowing at the 1978 World Championships and was a United States national champion 6 times. When Russia's invasion of Afghanistan led to the U.S. boycott of the 1980 Olympics, DeFrantz was extremely disappointed and filed a lawsuit based upon her conviction that it was the athlete's choice to compete and that no one could force an athlete to go or not go to the Olympics. She lost the lawsuit, but received a medal for her efforts from the IOC. In 1986, DeFrantz became the first woman and first African American to represent the United States on the International Olympic Committee. 11 years later, in 1997, she was elected to serve as the IOC's first female vice president. Sonny Vaccaro is a former sports marketing executive and is considered one of basketball's most well-connected insiders. He remains a formidable force in contemporary sports marketing and the future of collegiate athletics. His visionary promotional innovations, beginning with the signing of Michael Jordan to his first major endorsement package, revolutionized the sports marketing genre with shoe contracts, team affiliations, and other groundbreaking promotional partnerships, which have helped propel the fortunes of countless athletes, collegiate programs, and professional teams. Sonny continues to make regular appearances on television and radio sports talk programs locally and nationally. He's known for speaking on a wide range of issues, including student-athlete rights, regulatory hypocrisy, limitations on young athletes crossing over to professional status, and other hot-button issues in sports today. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Kenneth Shropshire, who is the David W. Hawk Professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He is the author of several award-winning books, including The Business of Sports, The Business of Sports Agents, The Sports Franchise Game in Black and White, Sports and the Law, and Basketball Jones. His expert views have been presented in the Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated, National Public Radio, and Nightline. A Stanford University and Columbia Law graduate, Shropshire previously worked in private law practice and as an executive with the LA Olympic Organizing Committee. He is also the director of the Wharton Sports Business Initiative and serves as an arbitrator with clients including the National Football League Players Association and USA Track and Field. Professor Shropshire is also special counsel at the law firm Duane Morris, LLP. And this is a very special race and sports program because Ken has just retired from the University of Pennsylvania, and so he will be moderating this evening's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Shropshire and all of our guests.
Thank you, Camille. Well, good evening, everybody. So we also have a lot of celebrities in the audience, too. We have, where's Elton Cochran Fikes, you know, the first African-American runner of the sub-4-minute mile. We got Ann Koger, one of the greatest African-American tennis players that didn't get a chance to play and then played and showed us what she could do. Ken Noel, who is, as we talk tonight, is one of the masterminds behind the Olympic Project for Human Rights. So we definitely want to have an opportunity to engage with all of you as well. People that have engaged in this issue and thought about it and been impacted by it. So what we're going to do is kind of give everybody, we got a big panel, so give everybody a chance to kind of give us some short thoughts on things. And we really want to think about how we got where we are today. So initially I'm going to ask Preston to make sure you all know what his men did to talk about the protests that they did. And then I'm going to kind of start, it actually works pretty well chronologically. I'm going to start with John and going to kind of work our way down the row to hear a little bit about the engagement that each of them has had on this important topic. And really what we want to get to is think about where are we going? And is it going the right way? Are these the kinds of things that are going to help the bigger issues in the country? And we'll see how long we go before we mention our president's name, and that being one of the bigger issues in the country. So that's the kind of place we should engage in, the kinds of things we should think about, and walk out of here with some thoughts of how to continue to be more impactful with the people that you are and the people you have influence over. So Preston, why don't you, for those who, I mean, it was a national story, but those that weren't local didn't hear all the details. Just take a few minutes and talk about what you and your players found yourself in.
Okay, first of all, I'm Preston Brown, born and raised Camden, New Jersey. I'm honored to be here with some of these wonderful people. Obviously, they've been doing this a lot longer than I've been living, but that's just a...
Nobody wants to be told they're old.
But just
we know you're the youngest one up. Go on.
Just to go back to, in preparation for the season, it was the day before our first football game, and so people don't understand. I actually never stood for the national anthem my whole entire life as an athlete. My grandmother, she was a Haitian immigrant that came over in the 30s. And she kind of explained to me when I was like 11 years old that, this wasn't really made for us. And, I watched her, struggle as a crossing guard, trying to take care of, my mom who had a drug addiction with 6 kids and all that stuff. So I had explained to the team, like, hey, listen, I'm going to take a knee because, I feel like Colin Kaepernick was doing it for people who lived in a situation like we did.
So it was after you saw Kaepernick that you decided to make it more an affirmative step.
Right, it was after he did it but I felt compelled to do it on that stage only because here's a millionaire who was doing it for people who are on our level, and I see the experiences and the things that he talked about, like those things actually happen and were happening to like our student athletes. I've seen it happen even within my own family. So, and the kids all asked me why. I explained it to them. I gave them the historical content that I had. Like in college when I played at Tulane, you know, I always just kind of sat down. Nobody ever paid attention to it, but, you know, I just kind of sat down, talked to the trainer or whatever, and then we played the game. High school basketball, I never stood up. Nobody ever said anything. It wasn't a big deal. So when I saw Kaepernick do it on TV, I was like, oh, like I was talking to my mom. She was like, well, you've been doing that for forever. But it didn't mean anything to anybody. And I honestly didn't think anybody would even care. I just told the team that they had a choice. They didn't have to do it. I didn't even know everybody did it until after the game. The first thing the reporter said was, how do you feel about your whole team taking a knee with you? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Because I always look out ahead as the leader of the team. And, you know, I just told them I never put them in a position to, you know, not be successful. But this is what I was going to do, and they had their right to do it or not. And when I asked them why they did it, they were like, well, because you were leading us, and, you know, we support you in the things that you were going to do. And then I saw it retweeted like 80,000 times, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, impact, right? Impact. So why don't we come back? I want to come back to talk some about the repercussions and the follow-up and all that sort of thing next. But let me go down to John, who just received the example of the length of time you should take to respond to these questions. So, I mean, so many places we could begin to talk, but John, I think one of the most, I mean, a lot of stuff is interesting about the '68 protest, but talk about, you know, we heard Preston talk about how he made the decision to do what he did. I mean, your story is a little bit longer. We talked about the build up to it, but how did you decide to do what you did?
Well, you know, I decided, I guess, as a little kid on Lenox Avenue.
See, I knew he was going to go back to little kid. Now we got a long story about it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, that's the only way I can start it. I mean, I began to notice things very early in my life as a kid in New York. One of the first things I noticed was white flight. You know, I'm sitting back here as an old man now and thinking about white influx. You know, they left the neighborhood. I began to realize that it was a few white folks that stayed in Harlem. They were transients, a lot of them. So you see two transients, we used to call them winos, laying on that island out in the middle of Lenox Avenue. And I saw an experience that rings in my mind all these years. There was two individuals laying on this island on a Saturday morning. And I'm out in front of my father's shop out there in the doorway. As a young white cop came up, and white guy was laying down kind of like in a fetal position, and the cop went over and banged his stick on the ground, and then he poked the individual, woke him up, told him to move on. Well, the brother, you know, we get comfortable no matter where we are, and he was laid back with his arm behind his head and his feet sticking up like that. So the police went over to him, and he banged his stick on the ground again. I figured he was going to poke him. Well, he didn't poke him. The guy didn't move, and he went in pursuit to walk past his shoulder area, chest area, and went down to his feet and took that nightstick like it was a baseball bat and wore the bottom of this man's shoes out. And the guy just levitated. I've never seen anybody just from laying position, laid, and he shot across Lenox Avenue, almost got hit by a car. And I was astounded. And I remember asking my father, I said, Daddy, why did he do that? Why did he do that? And my father told me, he said, well, son, all people are not treated the same. At a very early age, I realized that something was wrong, something is broke. Then I began to look at various things through the TV. Saw one white guy running on TV, guy called Robin Hood, which impressed me. Here's a guy that's running around and he was concerned about those who was less fortunate or those that didn't have as much clarity in his mind or as much heart. And he wasn't concerned about the king, or he wasn't concerned about the sheriff of Nottingham. He was concerned about that forest and those people. And he said, if they come through this forest, they got to pay a tariff. So I looked at Nottingham as Harlem. And those people that was coming through was the freight trains out in front of Yankee Stadium. In my neighborhood, I was fortunate because my mom went back to school, became a nurse. My father was an entrepreneur. He had a shoe shop or a shoe business. But that was the cream of the crop relative to everybody else, was just in such dire needs. There was no ice in the icebox, no food in the cabinets, and people were lost. So I went over and I started hitting the freight trains. Now, I'm hitting the freight trains with the same thought in mind that that's not the way I was raised. My mother and father didn't raise me to do this. But I didn't see nobody else helping those individuals, and this food is coming through. They need to pay a tariff. So we started hitting the freight trains and giving the food out to people in the neighborhood. The New York Police Department found out that I possibly was involved in this, and they went to my father and said, Earl, because they all played poker together on the weekends. Some break-ins at the freight yard, and we think Johnny had something to do with it. You need to talk to him. My father stopped him, said, nah, that's your job. You need to talk to him. And he sent him over to McCoon's Park, which was right across the street from the Yankee Stadium. And they came over and they circled the whole park off, and they got a hold of me, told my partner to sit up against the fence and told me, you have a talent. But before we tell you about the talent, there's been some break-ins. We think we know who's doing it. We can't do anything till we catch him. And Mr. Lester just bust his nose up against my nose, and we gonna catch him. In other words, you better back off. And Mr. Bryant said, tell him the other thing. And he said, I have a talent. Now, when somebody tell you that you have a talent as a young individual, you get out there and say, wow, that's great, I have a talent. But my mind didn't work like that. My mind works like I have this talent, but what do I have this talent for? Is it just merely to show everybody that I'm good at what I do in this particular talent? Or was I supposed to use this talent as a means for something? Then I began to put it together in terms of saying, the better I got, and this is where athletics had a marriage with social activity or political activities. Because I began to realize with this talent that God gave me, the better I perfected the talent, I had opportunity to turn up the volume on issues that confronted me, which was the people in my community. As I began to grow, I realized it wasn't just in Harlem, black people was in strife, but it was throughout the United States. As I grew in sport, it wasn't just in the United States, it was throughout the world. Like a guy asked me last night in the Bahamas, he said, John, how come you didn't get hooked up with the Black Panthers? And I told him, I said, a guy asked me a similar question, like, how come you didn't join the Muslims? And I told him, I said, well, man, it's a very good question, but I didn't hook up with the Black Panthers because they're local. I said, my spirit is universal. I'm trying to save people of color that's being stressed out on a universal level. This is why it mounted up to Mexico City to do something that would be like a beacon for society, where everyone will be able to clue in on that and make some sort of decision for themselves as to whether it was right or wrong. You talked about what's happening now with young brother here. He's in a social media epidemic right now. We didn't have that in 1968. Only social media we had was that Olympic Games because it was the first time that the games was ever televised universal. The first time that was in color. So people say, why do you use the Olympic Games? Well, if I'm trying to make a message to society, where else to do it but the Olympic Games? So I had to perfect my game to go to the Olympic Games. And you sit back, you think about, I'm not the first guy that did this. Jack Johnson did it. Paul Robeson did it. Marion Motley did it. And I can tell you a whole bunch of athletes before me that did it. But the social media wasn't there for everyone to be clued in as they were when I went to Mexico City. And now let's go to the next people.
Thank you, John.
Hey, guys, I'm sorry, this is my pet peeve. My wife wants to spank me every time I say this. But don't applaud for me, please. I mean that. I'm here to make a connection, okay? So at the end of the thing, if y'all want to applaud, fine. But I'll tell you, if you applaud now, I'm gonna tell you to throw money up here, okay? So let's keep the show moving.
So, before we, all right, Sonny. You know, Sonny's had, we were talking earlier today, maybe 3 different iterations of his life. But when I think about the panel, the one thing that everybody up here has received is some form of hate mail along the way. That everybody up here, and maybe that's a badge of honor, has been hated in some kind of way along the way. And in terms of people that have been activists for athletes, I will say Sonny in some ways may be one of the most misunderstood in terms of the things that he's done along the way. And hopefully by the end of this evening, people will begin to understand even more so why that is the case. And we'll kind of skip a little bit of the first part of his life, but Sonny, I do want you to tell enough to tell everybody how you got involved. And what everybody should know is the major cases that are taking place that you hear about against the NCAA for athletes' rights, for their likeness and image, for greater revenues to go to them. Sonny is like the old offensive lineman that's behind the scenes that has devoted probably the last dozen years of his life to doing this. So if you could just in this round, Sonny, talk about how you got to the point where you decided this is what you wanted to focus on.
I got there through 77 years of being the same person I was in my childhood with my parents in Pennsylvania. Kenneth, I'm the same person. What it took was a little bit what Tom said and what Preston said. It takes a while for people to understand who and why you do what you do with your life. I never done anything other than advocate for whatever. My life has dictated that, and I'm not going to go through Jordan or that, because that to me was a position that allowed me to be here. Because when I die, they'll say he's the guy that signed Jordan, like I'm the guy that shot Liberty Valance. But my life basically has been consistent with youth. And the irony of this particular substance here, the majority is a black audience, and I'm here with 4 black individuals who have accomplished quite a bit. I'm not a coach, I'm not an Olympian, and I'm certainly not a great track star. These people, and you, Kenneth, in your world, you've experienced what it was. I'll never forget something I said a long time ago. Spike Lee was in the audience. I was running ABCD camp, and I'll get to your point. And I basically became this figure because of black athletes, basketball players. I knew that when it all started in 1965 with the high school all-star game. And I'll get to, see, I'm not good at that, Ken, or cutting for 5 minutes, like that. But my life has revolved.
I let John set the example of how to do it, so it's great.
There you go.
My life has revolved around the superior athlete, the majority of them being minorities, and their mothers and dads gave me permission to be in their life. You think it was awkward now? You think it was, you know, what young Preston's doing, what Anita did, what John did? Be the white guy that tried to do it. Okay? Be the white guy and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying, guys, I don't need a throne on my head. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm telling you what's consistent, what I've seen for all these years. I've seen a group, and we'll stick to athletes, then we'll go into all the other hypocritical, hypothetical things that I've watched in college athletes. And then you'll go through that the main reason we're here, the main reason why society even reacts to John Carlos and Tommy Smith doing what they did and their buddy from Australia, okay? The main reason is because they, in one way or another, have earned money for the people they were working with. They unfortunately couldn't get anything other than maybe shoe money in 68, but they're making it for other individuals or other corporations because of their abilities. And when you go to get up to O'Bannon, I got to O'Bannon because I was really fighting for the age limit with Jennings. You know, I thought Brandon called me out of the clear blue sky and didn't want to get put through the aggravation of being red-shirted or red flagged, I think it was called, to go to the University of Arizona because they're questioning whether he passed his test or not. Never in my life I've seen anything so public is whether kids either are smart or not smart. Did they pass the test? Did somebody take it for them? Did he cheat? Was the academic counselor there giving him something? And Brandon Jennings brought this to my vision.
So in some ways, for those who don't know, Brandon Jennings was really the poster kid that got caught in that one and done kind of space, that if you don't go to college for a year, you can't play professional basketball. And not being able to do that for a number of circumstances, the test scores and the like, he was really caught in a no man's land in terms of what to do next. So Sonny engaged in that moment, and that's what he's talking about.
Take 2 minutes and we'll let Anita talk. But so Brandon calls me, and I go through all the political things. I go to Washington, D.C., my wife and I. We go meet Congressman Conyers from Michigan. I meet everybody. I was getting David Stern to come there. Let's figure this out. You don't have the right. You do not have the right to impose an age limit on earning a living. That was my whole thing. No one can do this. What the thing is not.
Turn your mic on.
I don't know, but I told you.
Let me see it. I got you.
I'm not good at this.
I got
stuff.
you.
All right.
You lied.
I don't have the right. They don't have the right to tell you can earn a living. It was a cold, hard fact. That's the reason I fought for Jennings. How can someone dictate to you any other aspect of life? If you can earn, you can earn. They were saying, no, you got to go play for amateur ball. You got to go play for the NCAA. Well, that was wrong. So Brandon Jennings, to his credit, his mother and his little brother went to Italy. We got him a hell of a contract. He didn't go to school. And they crucified him for not going to school. That's a cruel word to use, but they beat his butt up for not going to school. They said he was dumb. That's the reason he didn't go. Well, he wasn't too dumb. He went to Italy, did well, made good money for a year, but come back, got drafted 10th in the NBA draft, and still playing in the NBA as we speak today. In fact, he's playing tonight for the Washington Wizards 13 years later. Or 10 years later. That's a nice story, isn't it? I get to O'Bannon because of that. I'm speaking at Howard Law School. When a friend of mine hears me speak on the NCAA, I'm looking for a plaintiff to help to fight, to sue the NCAA. You know the problem, John? The athletes don't fight back. You know the problem, John? The coaches who the athletes play for don't fight for the athletes under the auspices of the NCAA. The coaches are making their living. Does not everyone understand? Everybody connected to the whole system make their living on 10 kids or 50 kids. They pay every bill.
They call that pimping.
Well, I don't know what they call it, because sometimes I can't go where I want to go with what you use as a phrase. But they called me the shoe pimp. How the hell do you think I felt? That's what I was called. So I am indirectly, vicariously connected. So let me just tell you what that meant. That meant not only did they deprive them of a living, but they're going to deprive you of your own image, your own likeness. That's what O'Bannon was about, and I got a lawyer to listen to me at Howard University by a freak of nature. And I got Ed O'Bannon finally to stand up and be a plaintiff. O'Bannon fought for the rights of all the people he'll never, ever meet. And you know what? To this day, we're still looking for current athletes to file other ones. The NCAA, in its most beautiful wisdom and beauty that you can see, I'll tell you what they do. Nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. The only thing constant since Teddy Roosevelt said, let's make this cleanest game up in 1900, was one thing. The athletes. And starting from Jimmy Thorpe, everybody seemed to do something wrong in that organization. They found reason to take away because of a word called amateurism. Amateurism is not a word. Amateurism, if you go to the dictionary, was described for the elitists, the Downton Abbey people in London in 1900. For the privilege. They didn't want the working people to golf with them or play tennis with them. So you had to be an amateur. Well, the rich people didn't have to get paid, but the poor people had to get paid. So to get you to O'Bannon, and we'll go to Anita, to get you to O'Bannon, the most gratifying thing I ever did in my life, the most thing is, if anyone in this room ever remembers, not because I had the guts of Eddie O'Bannon, not because I was the one that was harmed. I wasn't harmed in any way, but I'll tell you what I lived to see. I lived to see a lie that was perpetrated since 1984 by the antitrust ruling that the NCAA hid behind. I lived to see the day they took the cloak off, the Wizard of Oz, the fantasy land they live in Indiana. There's only one pure thing about college athletes. It's the players. it's the players. Do you really think CBS, NBC, and ESPN and all these networks would give a damn if they didn't do something for these kids? They want the games. And the only ones that play the games, the last time I looked, are 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. And the two games we're talking about that make billions of dollars are football and basketball. And if you just go through the rosters, and I don't have to draw a diagram, just go check and see where the majority of the athletes are coming from. And did I answer your question?
Thank you, Sonny.
You want the cake?
So Sonny mentioned one athlete that stepped out and allowed himself to be a named plaintiff in a case at O'Bannon in the case against the NCAA. I mean, one of the first athletes to take the risk and have their name assigned to a case on the other side of the V was Anita DeFrantz. And it's one thing to have your name O'Bannon versus the NCAA. It's another thing where on the other side of that is the United States of America. So, and you know, that's I haven't had the opportunity to do that. So, Anita, if you could talk some. So this is in 1980. I guess leading up to 1980, the Moscow Olympics, when President Jimmy Carter decides that the U.S. should boycott the games. And then these athletes we're talking about, Anita was one of them, having won a bronze medal in 1976 in Montreal. And like most athletes, she wanted to go back and win the gold. And then this happens. So Anita, if you could take us through, a young woman at this time, a young law student, really, just out, how this came about in your thinking during that time.
I suppose it had to do with the fact that when you know something's wrong, you know it's wrong. And I'd been brought up that way. I come from a family that's been involved with human rights, civil rights for a long time. And for the President of the United States to say, as he did, well, if the Soviets, they were Soviets. Some of the young folks in here don't know what that means. Sorry. It's okay.
The Soviet Union?
Soviet Union, yeah. If they don't move these 60,000 troops by a date certain, we will not send the spectators nor the athletes to the games. So I'm thinking, what is he talking about? We don't send spectators. And he has nothing to do with whether you make the team and go to the games or not. So I became concerned. And I tried to find out more about what was going on in the White House and why they were going down this path and on what basis. And after finding out that it was basically, in one hand, it's clearly beautifully political because there may count coaches and others, maximum 1,000 people in the United States directly affected. Now, families more. But out of 70 million people at the time, politically, so you get that number mad at you, and you're running for president. Why not? So it was very simple to come to that conclusion. But what it did, it was kind of a way of pull apart our rights and freedoms. It's kind of what, I'm not going to be the first one to say it. I refuse. So I won't.
Come on.
But you can imagine what I won't say. Has begun to done, but he decreed that our team shall not go. Well, the problem was it's the U.S. Olympic Committee that has to make that decision. They're the only ones who can send a team. And unfortunately, the USOC, I was much younger then, but I said of them they were medical miracles. They could walk without a spine. Very young, very young. So they chose not to go because of the great pressures. The USOC at that time, it's a completely different world now. And at that time, remember, the sponsorships were rare, if they existed at all. And the USOC was just starting to have sponsorships. And there was a total of $10 million worth of sponsorship support that the U.S. government promised that they would give to the USOC if the USOC cooperated and did not send a team. That money has yet to be seen, but 10 million now would be far too little. So I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong for the athlete is the only person who can decide whether to go or not. There's no one else. Well, of course, the coach who picks the team, and then the athletes.
So Anita, and then Preston, I'll come back to you. I do want to start talking about the youth and kids a little bit more and what's going on today. I mean, youth all the way up to the professional men and women protesting today. But you then spent, after law school and some other things, you spent a good part of your life giving away money with the LA 84 Foundation in Southern California with the profits from the 84 Olympics. And I'm wondering, I hadn't asked you this before, what kinds of conversations with those thousands of kids that you helped did you have about activism and obligation, if that's the case, responsibility, as they were coming up and you were using sport in the way that you did?
In a variety of ways, it was very important. We have a lot of people who were immigrating, as I did in a sense, from the East Coast to the West Coast, but immigrating into the Los Angeles area from far greater distances than I did. And sport became a way of learning about cultures and supporting cultures. Having a woman, a little girl rather, who wanted to learn how to swim, couldn't swim. She was Islamic, so she had to wear things that were not, she couldn't wear it at that time. I'm sorry this is true, but at that time she couldn't. So we were able to develop an opportunity for her to learn to swim because we got a pool set up at a public school, and specifically at that time, kids who needed that situation could have it. And then we talked about why we were doing it and what it meant and how important it was that everyone learn how to swim, primarily because if you can swim, you can row. And I'm always about getting more people to row. So swimming, and then we had conferences where we had kids come in and tell us what it was about sport in high school and what they wanted to do with their lives and if they cared about what was going on. This was during the time that, I know this is going to shock you, that they found out that in baseball they were using steroids. It's very shocking. And so there was much talk about that and why did it matter? And shouldn't you just let the athletes do whatever they want? And kind of ethics of letting somebody do whatever they want even though it might kill them. By the way, that study was never done. It's apocryphal. There's supposedly a study where a number of athletes were asked if they could take this drug, they'd be guaranteed a gold medal. And I don't know why they always put it on the Olympic Games.
Would they take it, yeah.
Yeah, they'll win a gold medal, but in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years you'd be dead. Would you take it? Of course, everyone says yes in the study. Well, the study did not happen. So I can put to bed that.
Thank you, here at Penn. So Preston, take us to, I guess, the weeks after you guys did the protest. Both, what did you and the kids hear from the 80,000 moments of social media, and then what kind of engagement did you have with the kids from that point forward, and then anything that they've done since then?
Well, the very next day, we actually had a young lady who played on our football team my first year as the head coach. We had a player who was shot and killed, and she had played flag football with them, so she had promised them, like, hey, I'm going to go and play football with the team and stick it out. So she did for an entire season, came to every practice, never. So she was actually, like, on Facebook, like, going back and forth with people. Like, people were calling, like, the students, like, illiterate, stupid, like, oh, they're from Camden, they don't know any better. And I was thinking to myself, like, what does that have to do with literacy? Or, like, it didn't make any sense. And, like, they were calling her, like, all these different kind of names. I was asked, like, not to engage with folks on the social media. And then I probably had, like, in the first 24 hours, like 1,700, like, Facebook requests, like, on the inbox, because people were trying to, like, send me messages. And then there were, like, mixed messages, people who knew me, who personally knew me, they were saying, like, hey, I didn't have the courage to ever do anything like that because I'm in the military, but like I appreciate what you're doing, like for those kids. And then other people were like, you know, F you know, leave America, you know, like anything under the sun that you could think of that was derogatory, like they were saying those things. Some of the immediate engagement for the kids was that they actually got a chance to see people's responses, like on the national stage, like, wow, they really feel this way about us? Like, we only heard it in conversation, but like they actually saying these things, like calling us the N-word, you know, telling us that we'll never amount to anything, you know, so.
Well, how are the kids doing now? What's your interaction with them now?
Well, this past year, we had, you know, 6 guys sign scholarships to college. 80% of the football teams on the honor roll. We had the 12 highest SAT scores in the whole school. We got a kid going to the Naval Academy. We got a kid going to Rutgers. We got one going to Maine. We got 4 going to Cheney.
So this was a trick for coaches to pay attention to you guys. You did.
I mean, not necessarily, but
it did bring some attention.
It did.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, I received a phone call from a lady from the BBC, and I was thinking, like, wait, the BBC? Like, I was kind of like taken back because I didn't know the number. It was like 1, like a plus, and then like all these zeros. So I wasn't sure if like I should answer it. And you know,
and you answered it.
She had like a British accent, and I'm thinking like, it's like, you sure you got the right person? She was like, yes, we're going to be in Washington, D.C. We want to come down and be at your next game and follow you guys around for a couple of days. And I was like, you sure? I was like, and then she followed up with an email, because I was like, no at first. And then I said, you know what? Like, this is the only way for people to really understand, like, what it is that we go through. So she followed me around in the team for about 3 days. I took her to my old neighborhood, and I was just showing her, like, this is the corner of Malton Pike where my grandma was the crossing guard. It's like, but all these buildings that are across the street, they're still abandoned from since I was a kid. And, you know, you can go 3 blocks to the left, and she's like, oh, well, it looks really nice over there. I was like, well, that's a totally different town. But there's a separation and divide that I can look across the street and see no abandoned buildings, no abandoned homes, and the lowest price house is 5 to 6 times higher than the highest price house just across the street. And everybody knows that housing and money is tied into your school district. So our school district appears to be, you know, this dilapidated school district. We're not educating kids. Like, that's baloney. I mean, I went to Woodrow Wilson, and, you know, I graduated from Tulane with honors. Like, I never felt inferior. You know, I'm one of 6. You know, 3 of us graduated from college. All, you know, my brother went to UNC. I got a brother who went to Drew. So I try to tell kids, like, hey, physics is physics. You know, it's, you know, force has the same formula no matter where you go. It's what we take and how we apply it. So that's one thing I always use, because in sports, you know, it's like, me, myself, how can I use my acceleration to create the greatest force for people that I'm going to engage with? And that's what I do for my players. You know, I carry the duty and service that my grandmother carried with her every day of her life. I mean, she lived with cancer for 12 years and never told anybody. They gave her 6 months to live, and she told, hey, don't cry for me. Similar to, you know, we saying, like, don't clap for she, like, don't cry for me. You know, I'm living out my journey the way it's supposed to be. But, you know, you just make sure that you have to look out for your people. An interesting story is last year in Charleston, South Carolina, I took 14 players and my 2 sons, who are 6 and 4, on a trip to the Citadel. They had offered 6 kids a scholarship, and they had like a camp. So I promised the coach, like, you know, we'll go there, then we'll like spend the day at the beach. So we did the camp, and like we were taking the kids to the beach. So we're walking, there's like hundreds of people walking. We were the only people of color walking, so naturally, everyone walked on the left side of the street, and like we were on the right side of the street. And, you know, everybody's walking, beach towels, no shirts on, whatever. And the police officers like just started showing up, like parking cars, and they're like walking behind us. So I was like, officer, is there a problem? And he's like, well, where are you guys going? And my 6-year-old son said, well, to the beach like everybody else. And I was just, the kids was like, wow, like they really followed us all the way to the beach to make sure we stayed at the beach. Like there was a car like sitting like just outside by the boardwalk, and I'm thinking like, we're not doing anything different than what everyone else is doing, yet like we're being followed. So when everything came out, the kids like thought about that situation. They were thinking like, man, like, people really like are acting like this towards us. But after the BBC article came out, like on the world stage, like people from the Netherlands, like they were sending us like all these kind of like letters and postcards saying that, the world loves you. If you ever come, out of the country, you have a place to stay, we'll take you in. Like, it was like a total, like it was totally different. And the kids got a chance to see that as well. I'm like, the world's a beautiful place. Some people believe what they believe, but.
Well, let me play off that a little bit, especially with John and Anita. World love for what you did. I mean, what did you hear from around the world as opposed to what, most of us know you heard in the U.S.?
Are you
Anita,
talking
John?
to me?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I think
in 400 words or less. No, go ahead.
Kenny, you need to have an open forum, man. Yeah.
We understand.
But I think, first of all, the perceptions outside the United States is far widespread than the perceptions here within the United States. I remember when we were younger, we appreciated going locally to Canada because we were respected and admired for who we was as individual human beings, opposed to how we were treated here in the United States. Now, at the same time, when I went to Europe, certain places in Europe is okay, and there's other places you go to and you run into the same situation. I heard the N-word in Germany as much as I heard it here in the United States. I went to Romania. It was a bad situation in Romania where I saw blacks that were playing soccer. They came from different parts of the world to go there to play soccer, and they were going through the same changes that blacks in America went through. And they were asking me questions about how did blacks deal with the situation? How did our civil liberties take front of stage? And you express it to them. But yet and still, those that was working for the State Department, they was offended because it's almost like I let the cat out the bag in terms of telling them how to deal with racism over there. Racism is a thing, it's a disease, and it has no one set location where it stays. It spreads, and we are the caretakers. We're the ones that are supposed to be able to put it out, whether we put water on it or we put dirt on it or whatever to stamp it out. But there's so many people on planet Earth that doesn't have the mindset to realize that they have a significant role in life to stamp this thing out. Because I sit back and I tell a lot of people, I say, when I went to Mexico City, I was 23 years old. I just turned 23 years old. To deal with something on such an enormous level, to try and deal with the world, to deal with social issues. But I didn't do that for me at 23 years old. I did it for my kids. Because when I got married at such a young age, my whole life at that time as a youngster wasn't for me. It was for my kids. When my father went to war in the First World War, he told me, he said, son, I didn't go to war because I wanted to be a soldier. I went to war to make it a better life for you. He said, I thought I did that until I came home. Then when I came home, I realized that I was treated even worse as a black soldier. So that makes you realize, say, hey man, this is something that you have to dig into. I remember I had racists come, the police in LA, racist police come up and put the chokehold on. Everybody remember back, the older individuals remember back when they had the chokehold and it was killing people. When they started doing that, and I'm saying to myself, one day they're gonna come up on me, and lo and behold, they came up on me and did it. So I got this communication with God or whoever the founding father of this universe. And the cop came and put a chokehold on me. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, it's here. And I'm straining to tell this guy, I said, man, you made a mistake. I was telling brother here, you made a mistake. And the cop looking at me like, what are you talking about? I made a mistake. And he got the chokehold, he's choking me out. And the sergeant said, let him go. What are you talking about? He made a mistake. I said, he made a big mistake. He said, why? I said, man, let me tell you something. I was dead when I was born. You made me dead because you didn't let me have a life as a youngster growing up in Harlem. I say, so for me to stop breathing right now is no big deal. I said, but you made a big mistake because I saw your face. And he looked at me, so what do you mean you saw my face? I said, well, when I die, because I have no fear about dying, because I'm going to die anyway. But I just want you to know that wherever I go, I'm going to wait for your ass to come. Because it ain't over. Okay? And that's the way you have to confront something that's trying to snuff you out of life. You got to give them something to think about, too. You know, so when I went to Mexico City, my thing was to be that lightning rod, to be that beacon, to let kids, you know, for years ago, I hear about Sonny, what Sonny was saying earlier. And you think about where he said, well, what the blacks are going through, imagine what he went through as a champion for black causes. Okay? But you know what point Sonny is? Sonny is John Brown. Sonny's Peter Norman. You understand what I'm saying? Now you sit back and you say, well, why is it that you don't hear a damn thing about John Brown? He's a white man in America, did heroic things. Is it because he did something for black people that they erased him? Peter Norman, same man. John Brown on the 1968 victory stand right alongside me. They erased him. Is it because he was fighting causes for black people? No, he was fighting causes for humanity. John Brown was fighting for humanity. Black people were just caught up in the cross. You understand? So if this man can do it, you sit back and you say to other people, say, man, what's holding you up? Is it fear about dying? And you have to take into account, and everybody in this room have to take this into account. You know, a lot of people with emphasis on the day you was born. Oh, Johnny was born, he's such a beautiful baby, 5 pounds, 10 ounces. Oh, Johnny died, he was terrible, he lost his life so young. And they put emphasis on birth, and they put emphasis on death. Well, birth is non-relevant. Death is non-relevant. But what is relevant is what the hell did they do between those two dates? That's what the question is for everybody. I don't care what your complexion is. I don't care how much money you have in your bank account or how much you don't have. But what I do care about is what substance do you have in you. Understand? Well, I remember one time I was in New York. My wife was having my first child, and we was out of milk. And I was going across the street in the Bronx to the store, and I saw 3 white kids had a 4th white kid on the ground. And they kicking him and stomping on him. And I grabbed him, took the dudes and threw them off. I figured I'm gonna have some static from the ones I grabbed and threw away. The one that was on the ground told me, he said, nigga, you need to mind your business. The one that they were stomping on. You understand? So it made me realize it's not an individual that I'm dealing with a sickness. And the only way I can deal with the sickness is to step up to the sickness. I can't run from it, I can't turn from it, and I can't keep my mouth shut about it. Like my old man used to say, son, you know, a silent mouth will never be fed. It's the truth. If you don't let them know that something is wrong, imagine what you're doing for your kids 10, 20 years from now if you don't turn the stampede around now. So remember what I said, at 23 years old, I didn't have time to think about John Carlos. I thought about my daughter that was there, 5 years old at that time. I thought about my kids that was to come right now. And you know, my father was in the First World War. My brothers was in the Vietnam War. I had uncles that was in the Korean War. We fought for this country. We bled for them, we died for them. My old man told me something after I got back from Mexico City. He said to me, he said, Johnny, why'd you do all those bad things? And it choked me out. What bad things? What are you talking about, Pop? He said, go in that drawer, look in the drawer. My old man on his deathbed. And I opened the drawer and I look in, it was the New York Times. And on one segment here, they talking about H. Rap Brown. They talking about Stokely Carmichael. they talking about Harry Edwards. On the other column, they talking about John Carlos. But the story was the same story. And my father looked at me, he said, why'd you do all those bad things? And all I could do is look at my father and say, Daddy, do you know H. Rap Brown? No. You know Stokely Carmichael? No. You know Harry Edwards? No. Do you know John Carlos? Oh, come on, son. I said, no, Daddy. Do you know John Carlos? You're my baby boy. I said, right, Daddy. So if you know me, you know whether that's me what they're writing about. If they can write that about me, they can write that about any of us. I said, but the question is, Daddy, is this. You my daddy. If they can trick you into believing something about your own son, God help us, what does the rest of the world think about me as an individual? That's the questions we got to think about when we gonna step up to the plate and start saying, I don't have no fear because I'm gonna die one day. But the question is, what am I leaving my kids to spring off of? That's what I use sports for. Sports, you winning the medal, the Olympic Games. You know, I applaud Anita. She wanted to go and win her a medal. For me, I come off the slums of the city. I don't give a shit about no medal. Understand? Medals didn't turn me on in the least bit. I went to the Olympic Games merely because that was the vehicle to set society on fire, to make them wake up in the middle of the night and say, what the hell was that? To make them start to think, why would individuals put their life on the line? And don't think I didn't put my life on the line because they threaten me every day. They still send me threats. Just like brother said, the hate mail that he got. And I was whispering in Sonny's ear and say, I bet you got a few of those. Hey, we got books of them. I used to tell a guy, one guy wrote and told me, you see, you know what I'm gonna do for you, John? Nigger. He said, I'm gonna kidnap your father. He said, I'm gonna rape your father. He said, then I'm gonna cut him up and send him back to you in little pieces. I was so mad I was about to bust. But then God calmed me down, and when I went to do an interview, I told him in an interview, I say, guys like that, I said, he's the lowest piece of caca on earth. I said, not merely because of what he said, about what he didn't say. And what he didn't say, he didn't give me a return address, so I could have wrote and gave him a reply to his statement.
So, thank you, John.
We allowed to clap?
Oh, no.
We're not allowed to the
No,
end.
don't do that, Sonny.
So let me do this. I want to open up for questions in just a moment, but I want to hear just a moment from Anita about the global response she got to what she did, and then I want to open up to the panel and the audience. What do you think about Kaepernick? I just want you to have a chance to talk about that specifically. But Anita, the global response.
Well, I'm tempted to say what he said, but make it short. It was interesting because this is just,
Yeah.
it was mainly by phone or by written.
Oh, man.
And,
You just trying to get a book signed, man.
I got
a little pissed.
Uh-oh, someone needs to tell him that.
Yeah, let him know.
Let him know before too much happens here. Okay, I'll keep talking maybe.
So I will, for those who
I think we're good.
don't know, some of you know. So Anita, John, and I worked at the '84 Olympics together. So we are old friends. So none of this is surprising us at this moment.
For sure.
So I think his mic is off, but
Okay. Internationally, it was because we were working together, and it was a time when the athletes of the world were getting together. We were communicating by phone, by letter. It seems so ancient to say we were communicating by letter. And we were all with the same mind. We cannot let the games be destroyed. And in fact, people don't know this. Do you know how many people think that Moscow had a lot of people there from the world for those games? Were those games terrible? Were they successful? All right, enough. They were successful. There were about 88 countries there, which doesn't seem like a lot compared to the 140 we had come to LA, but we worked at it. There was money to bring people and so forth. So that's when the count began. We really initiated the notion of how many countries can we have here. The stuff at home was really bad. The phone calls, I just,
That I experienced, you know.
it's,
There's another panel outside.
yeah, okay. All right, anyway,
All right,
let's move
thanks,
on.
Thanks, Anita. Sonny?
Just to respond to John's unbelievable comments, the one thing it can change today, and I was talking to Preston and some other friends of mine, there's only one way we do win. See, but it's past John's generation, it's past mine, it's past Anita's, it's in semi-Preston's right now. But my idea, before the game's over for me totally, okay, is I have one more prayer left on this front. The prayer is that maybe your kids or your grandchildren or someone now in that in-between age of just having children, my plan now is to approach parents to come to listen to people like we have on this dais and listen to John Carlos and others throughout America. And also to bring their mothers with them and to stay with my cause against the NCAA and the flagrant that they do. The NCAA is controlling the youth of America. They control these kids when they're in 7th grade by recruiting and making you do all these things. But
Can you explain it?
let me tell you the answer to this, because what my last dream is, we got O'Bannon. Well, let me tell you, I'm going to sit in front of an audience. I pray to God I get the opportunity to tell these parents, these young people, like maybe I did 60 years ago. You say, you know what? It's on you now. We've seen what this world has turned out to politically. We've seen it because we never thought it could happen. It's been happening to you people, and I'm saying you people because I'm not black. It is the minorities I'm talking about. It's that audience is going to be very similar to this audience. Not in a negative way, in a positive way. The parents can join up and go to school boards. They can join on city councils. And their children should also register to vote at 18 years old so they know what registering to vote is. And then what they should do when these children are being recruited to go to the highest level Division I schools or the lowest level Division I school, if they're inducing you by recruiting you, they are buying you. They're inviting you to come. And then you do everything by their rules. You are conditioned. Our athletes today are conditioned. There are no more John Carloses. We had a couple kids. We had the kid from Connecticut wanted to eat something. Okay, we had the 2 football players that didn't play in bowl games. And lucky there was a white kid there. The kid from Stanford made a lot more sense to the American public than Fournette did from LSU. See, he was smart, bright, and a great kid and a great athlete, okay? I'm not demeaning him in any way. But it wasn't covered. It would have been if Mr. Fournette would have been the only guy that didn't go to a bowl game, believe me. And Johnny Manziel, if he'd have been Cam Newton that did what Johnny Manziel did, Cam Newton's daddy would have gotten hung. They hung him for things they thought they did already. They wouldn't let him come to the games. And Johnny Manziel got, if you people all remember this, he missed the first half of the Rice game. I mean, let's be honest about it. So what I dreamed can happen, that maybe you people, who some of you may be grandparents, you go home, and some of you may be coaches, and some of you are athletes, or some of you are coaching, because you're young people out there. Go home and do what my friend here did. Talk to these kids. They have rights. And you know what the biggest sin that the rights are avoiding? The academic sin of these universities. What happened at the University of North Carolina, the Harvard of the South, is a sacrilege. But Kenneth and I go back to the 1990s when the same thing happened at the University of Minnesota. It was scandalous, the guy got fired, and life went on. Life always goes on for these guys. It always goes on. But the kid that's dehumanized, the kid that gets beat up or gets injured or some damning thing happens or he does something wrong, they don't live it down. The reason I'll say, and I'll put this part, the reason I wanted to say this, it's up to this generation. They are now been weakened, John. We fought 15 rounds. We're at about the 13th round right now. I really believe that the athletes can get rights if everyone bands together. And you know what Sonny Vaccaro would like to see? I'd like to see the damn they can't do what John and Tommy did. They can't do what other people did. They can't do that because they did it, okay? But one of these days, maybe that whole team, when they throw the ball up for the Final Four, don't go out for 5 minutes. Just stay on the bench. And I'll tell you what, that world of cancer, I was part of the world, the $1 billion. It's $1 billion now. CBS will have their ass tomorrow morning. They'll say, I don't give a shit what you give these players. We need the games. And the games aren't played unless the kids play.
And let me just add to what Sonny is saying.
You weren't even in the room for half of it.
I heard that y'all heard me working in the back. Now, what I would like to say to add to Sonny is, first thing, we don't have consistency, okay? And what Sonny's talking about, we need to come together as one to make a statement. We do not have consistency. When you sit back, you think about what the college students did, and let's go to the professional ranks. Let's think about the owner of the Clippers, the statement that he made that was offensive. It was so offensive until all the Clippers basketball players, the blacks and those that were sympathetic to their cause, came together. And they made it clear to the owner of the Clippers, and they made it clear to the NBA league office. Yes, you're the cow that give the milk, and we appreciate you, we love you. But we learned over the years that you don't love us the same. But also we learned that, yes, you're the cow that gives the milk, but we're the grass that the cow has to eat in order to give milk. There's no grass, there's no cow. So Mr. Silver, I applaud Mr. Silver because Mr. Silver came in right away and he understood immediately. If I don't curtail this right now, the NBA is finished. But we as young individuals and parents, we don't understand that we have to be consistent to make change. Here I am, 50 years. I got an anniversary for 50 years from Mexico City. You don't think I would like to go sit down in my house and just be comfortable and say, I did mine and I don't have to worry about it no more because somebody else is taking the load? I got to go out and inflate people, to give them the courage, to give them the stamina to step up against what is wrong. I shouldn't have to push people to stand for what's right. But we don't have that consistency. As long as we don't have consistency, we show vulnerability. So remember, Sonny's gone to God in a few more years, and I'm going to be right on his butt. But the question Sonny's asking in his mind, the same thing I'm asking. Who's going to fill his shoes? Who's going to step up? Who got guts enough to step up in his spot? And brother, you hold your head up in the back, and I applaud that, but your hair is white as mine. I'm talking about somebody.
I'm trying to answer a question whenever you're finished.
Okay, yeah, Robert, I'm going to let you go. But I want to know how many youngsters are going to be able to step up and have a 50-year tenure to try and deal with these issues. Yeah, going to college is great. But just imagine if I went to the pros and they paid me right, I could pay my way to college. I used to go to NC2A and run for the NC2A, and they gave, you know what they give the American athletes when we were running? I'm running all over America with USA on my chest and feeling good about representing America. But I had a wife, I had 2 kids. You know what I was getting every day while I was going out to represent America? $2 a day. $2 a day to feed my family while I'm running all through Europe representing America and away from my wife and my kids. And they're telling me, as Sonny said, you're an amateur. Don't look for any money. Be proud, be happy that we allowed you to go and represent America. Nah, those days are over. It's time for y'all to step up to the plate. Go on, brother.
Please. John will take over as moderator.
Panelists, especially Ms. France, for your, thank you, and for your efforts as well. I just wanted to say a kind of a thing that the Black Lives Matter group of folks, they're not really present on the panel, and I can understand that. But if we look at what the students did at University of Missouri, the black athletes there, where they struck and refused to move and got an unresponsive administrator to leave. And I thought that some of the things that, whether it's Colin Kaepernick or some other players, that they were inspired by the younger people in the Black Lives Matter movement who are, I think, consistent. And I think that because the nature of the black community is always going to be struggle and whatnot. And so there is a follow-up on that. And my other question is that I know it's young people who are the ones who are involved in the suits against the NCAA about actually paying the players who bring the billions of dollars in. So I am not so pessimistic about the younger folks. If you remember there were a lot of folks who did not support you, man. A lot of your contemporaries at that time. Remember O.J. Simpson said he didn't even understand the argument back then.
Right.
There was a lot of things he didn't understand. But I'm saying that I think that there is a future, the Black Lives Matter, young people and those folks. So I am.
So the thing
I'm
we got,
very
we got,
positive
we got,
about that.
got two things that anyone wants to comment on. I mean,
Wait,
if
what
anyone
was
would
the
like to
question?
comment. Well, there was not a question mark at the end of either one of the statements, but the first one was the role of Black Lives Matter. Is that really impacting the youth today?
Let's talk about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is black women. Black women have been carrying the load forever. Never got the acknowledgement that they needed. The black women wanted to support the Olympic boycott in '68. They never got to play. But black women have always been there, and they've always been the consistent ones. But they don't shine the light on them. They just starting to say, you're going to shine the light on me now because I ain't going nowhere because I'm in a public venue now. Understand? Now, relative to those individuals that said that walked the other way in 1968, you can go to 999 of them, 9.9% of them, and every one of them will tell you they made a mistake. Because they've come to me right now and tell me, say, man, if I had to make that choice right now, I'll be right with you 1,000% because I don't have the fears that I had then, and the other ones will come and tell you, say, I'm more astute, I'm more knowledgeable now than I was at that time as well. You know, George Foreman, for instance. George Foreman is my man, my main man, and people try to make a divide between George and I. I'm a little older than George. George come out of Houston, Texas. I come out of Harlem, New York. I was far more acquainted with the situation at hand than George Foreman was at that time. And you know why George got the popularity, which God put in his hand to have the popularity? The guy that was the head boxing coach was my agent, a guy by the name of Pappy Galt. Came to me, he said, John, he said, I'm not going to say that I agree with what you did in Mexico City. I'm not going to say that I disagree. But what I am going to say is you need a way to feed your family. He said, I have a plan. His plan, he said, here's 2 tickets for you. Here's 2 tickets for Tommy. Y'all come to the fight tomorrow.
Thank you for your service to our community, Mr. Cole.
No, I'm not looking for thanks, brother.
I'm thanking you.
I appreciate it. But
I'm thanking you.
I appreciate it. But George Foreman went to the fight, beat up homeboy, and Pappy's idea was because of what we did in Mexico City with the flag, he felt that, hey man, this would be a great opportunity. He put the flag in George Foreman's hand and pushed George out there. Okay? Now, George went to rocket it. At the same time he was rocking up, we was crashing to the ground. Okay? They tried to make me say, well man, George is this and George on the negative side. No, I love George and respect George today as much as I did that day. But at the same time, you sit back and you look at those individuals that was out there trying to create a divide. Understand? George went up because we put our fist to the sky. But at the same time, Pappy didn't take into account, had we gone to the ring that night with our wives, we might not be here to have this discussion right now. Me in particular.
We had a question.
I just want to.
Oh, man, come on, man.
Can I speak to the college athlete thing being paid
Sure.
first? So I was a scholarship athlete at Tulane. I got off the Greyhound bus at 17 with no cell phone, with $80 in my pocket. And I'm thinking like, oh, you know, I got my 2 duffel bags, and I'm at the bus station in New Orleans. And I was talking to the lady. I was like, what? How do I get to the campus from here? She was like, oh, you just get out there on the trolley. It goes right to St. Charles Street. So I was like, all right. So, you know, I break one of the $20 bills that I had, paid the $1.25, got off the trolley. And I'm like, wait, how do I get to the football office? So I walk all the way to the back, and none of the coaches are there because it's July 5th, the day after 4th of July. So I'm like sitting there like, wait, they knew I was coming though, like class starts on Monday. And like I'm sitting out there for 6 hours in front of the Wilson Center, which is our football building. And the head athletic trainer's coming. He's like, wait, I remember you. Oh, you're one of our signees for the year. I'm like, yeah, I'm here. But yeah, I couldn't call anybody. I have a phone. And like I just remember like just being so broke like this whole summer. I'm 17. I didn't turn 18 yet. Camp's about to start. You know, I hadn't talked to my mom for like 5 or 6 days, so I'm like borrowing people's phone because back, my mom, she didn't even have a cell phone. And, I just think about all those days, like sleeping in the dorm thinking like, man, like I'm out here busting my hump every day, 5:30 workouts, going to class. I got no money, like nothing. All they gave us was, you can get meals on campus, but after 8 o'clock, like all the dining halls were closed. So it's like, man, we had a couple of hours, and you can't work during the playing season. So in the spring, like you want to get a job, but you really don't have the time to work either. So, we used to have these conversations all the time, like, man, I know I got to finish school, though. They paying for me to be here. And I used to always tell my teammates, like, man, look, y'all go ahead. I got to go to class because I'm 2,000 miles away. If I go back to Camden empty-handed, I'm just going to be another person who didn't make it and didn't have a chance.
Can I backtrack? The irony of this story, the school I was talking about, North Carolina, all the academic fraud, do you know that their basketball coach made close to $1 million for winning the NCAA? That was his bonus. That was his bonus. Just, all these schools, the coaches took their teams to the tournament. You could follow the bouncing ball. Anyway, the same man who brought the academic advisor to North Carolina to put that fraudulent class in where students didn't even go to a class to get a grade, okay? For 15 years, they've been debating what they're going to do at North Carolina. The man got $1 million bonus. Why? Because his 10 players were good enough and earned the win. That happened. But those players got nothing. Nothing.
Right.
That's where we're talking. Right. He got off the bus, nothing. He had to work, and this is like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There was really nothing. Now they're putting, the only reason some of these parents are getting to go watch their kid in the Final Four now, Mrs. Apple, the defensive back son at the Giants, I believe, from Ohio State 3 years ago, argued, why in the hell am I paying to see my son? Finally, they're bringing in those parents to watch a game that they make billions of dollars on. And they gave them, can you believe, $2,000 allowance to come. This is the wrong I'm trying to impress upon you. No one ever talks about these kids. You know what? And when you take it out like I have to, the extreme, because the last 10 years, that's all I know. I don't know the players, this is not negative, I'm not pinning Sonny or Vaccaro either. I'm saying to you is, it's so big, and because it's amateur, John, people think no one's making any money.
Right.
They're all making money. The president of the NCAA makes $2 million a year, and every time I make a speech, I say, I don't know what the hell the man does. Right. He doesn't have the authority to do anything.
Right.
He doesn't.
Right.
He has a suit on, and he walks around, and they quote him.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's right.
So, if you're asking me if players should get paid, I say yes.
Yeah.
So we got time for one more question, and then I'm going to see if there's any.
First of all, I want to thank all four of you for what you guys have done. It's a tremendous cause because I'm assistant coach over at Penwood High School over in the Yaden area, and I'm always talking to black children, trying to get them to do positive things as far as education because they have to have things to fall back on. But the question I got for Mr. Brown is in particular, number one, were you worried about the backlash for the parents? What was the support factor? Because coming from an impoverished city like Camden, I want to know, did you have all parents, all of your football players, parents on board when you made a decision not to stand up for the national anthem? I want to know what's your take on that.
So the first thing, like at the beginning of every season, I have a parent meeting. So you can't play football for me unless your parent's involved. If you don't have a parent, it has to be somebody in your life, your family, uncle, cousin that loves you enough to participate. Because I know that the football part is easy, but there are other demands. So, like, the parents know my personality and who I am. Like, I'm not afraid of anything or anyone. So, I told everyone to, let your parents know that I don't know what the outcome of tomorrow's game is going to be, but I didn't even know if it was going to be of any significance to anyone else. I mean, it was early in the game in Camden. The game starts at 11 o'clock on a Saturday, so nobody gets there on time anyway. So it was really like an empty crowd. It was an empty stadium. However, I always engage the parents or the players first to let them know that this is serious. Like this is a together commitment. And our kids have so many inconsistencies with people being in and out of their lives and being touched by violence and all those things. I try to make sure that I maintain my consistency. So we pride our things on 100% attitude, 100% belief, and 100% consistency. Like, that's our thing. You know, I tell them attitude, you spell it out, equals 100%. So I can't show up with 99, regardless of all the multitude of problems and things that come with me. So if I give you my 100, you have to bring yours as well. And that's the one thing that we start with. So to answer your question, all of our parents were on board. You know, they were happy for their children, you know, to have stepped out and have done something that was greater than themselves. Because again, so many people reached out to me saying, "Oh man, you know, I would have never had the courage to do it," which is why I know it was a great reason for us to have done it. Because so many people are either afraid or wouldn't have done it, didn't know to do it, and everybody's saying like, "Oh, if you want to do it again, like I'll join you this time."
So let's close out maybe 30 seconds each. Last takeaway comment.
I'll be last.
Can you do 30 seconds?
I'll be last. I'm last.
Okay, Preston, last takeaway thought. Just 30 seconds.
You know, again, I date everything back to my grandmother. She would always say, you know, suffocate the world with your greatness and make sure they never forget who you are. You know, I grew up hearing about Martin Luther King, Marcus Garvey, and all those folks, and like they've been dead a long time. And I always say to myself, like, why can't I be the next one of them? Like, which one of us is going to be the next one of them? And that's what I tell our young folks. Like, I'm not saying I get sick and tired of every Black History Month hearing about the same 20 people, but it's time for our young people to be able to, our young people don't even identify with them. They didn't even know who wrote the Black National Anthem. You know, that's like the first question of every Black History Month, and nobody knows who James Weldon Johnson was or what he was significant for. So I try to help young people become the next wave of those folks, people that they can identify with. I mean, they can identify with Steph Curry or, you know, people who play basketball or entertainers. However, those are like snippets in their lifestyle. I mean, it's great to know the impact that these people had because we're still talking about them all these years. But I want to be amongst that conversation when my time comes.
Thank you.
To a close.
Anita?
Speaking of people we don't know, Katherine Johnson. Who's Katherine Johnson? She got the athletes to the moon and back, or got them up in the air and back. We need to know who Katherine Johnson is, as well as the others. Two things. My parents taught us always to use the golden rule. Very simple and I think very logical. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. To me, it's like that is the best way to act that you can have. And the other thing is to ask for help. Especially our kids need to know to ask for help. There's so much confusing out there. And if you tell them to ask for help or let them know they can always ask for help, you can learn a lot and learn a lot about how they need to be helped.
Thanks, Sonny?
You know, my quick one is, I go to the O'Bannon trial, and John and I talked about, I met some great people, but I never met them personally that helped in this trial. And it's a very weird statement, isn't it? I got a lot of people who be plaintiffs. And one of the first one after Eddie signed up was a man named Harry Flournoy. Some of you guys may or may not remember Harry, but on the most famous basketball game ever played in America was the race game in 1956 with, you know, Texas Western and Adolph Rudd, right. Kentucky, okay? And I called people. I got the roster of that team, and I started calling people, and I got a hold of Harry Flournoy. Never met him. I knew he was the captain of the team. He wasn't the best. Neville Shedd was the best player, I believe, on that team. And they were really good, and I knew the coach. So I call Harry Flournoy out of the Clear Blue Sky, and he responds to me. And Harry signs up, and he brings on, you know, one of his teammates with him, David Lattin, who I knew when he was being recruited by Wichita State years ago. But they signed up. So Harry became a close friend of mine through the trial first one, Bill Russell and Oster come on. I mean, if you look at the list of the original 17 plaintiffs, it's one of the greatest things you can do, look at, because they all put their name on something that no one ever did, was sue the NCAA like that, and they were heroes. Well, Harry Flournoy told me a line that I'll never forget. We were talking about that game and whatever. And I said, you know, Harry, you know, we're in for a lot of shit. Because there's a lot of, in the early part, they called O'Bannon a failure because he wasn't a great pro. They demeaned him every way possible. He was a used car salesman, he said. All the things that were totally wrong about one of the nicest human beings God ever made. And Harry said, Sonny, we've been walking in quicksand all our lives. Don't tell me about it. I'll never forget that phrase. Right. We've been I'll cry right now. I never heard that before in my life. I've always heard what quicksand was. I turned to my wife, Pam. I said, I heard that one of the greatest quotes that's never going to be printed, you know. And that's what I got out of O'Bannon. When Bill signed his name, when Oscar signed his name, when those guys who had nothing to gain signed on because they knew that there was an injustice. So that to me was something I'll take away. The O'Bannon trial means more to me. I told you before, what I was able to do in my personal life with corporate allowed me to be involved with that to the 10 years of my life. And I hope God gives me 10 more, because I think that's not a good thing they're dealing with the NCAA. But I'll never forget the people in that trial.
Thank you, Sonny.
Right on, Sonny.
Carlos?
I have two statements, real quick and simple. This guy made a statement that stays with me every day, and that statement is, fight the power. Fight the power. And then the second statement I like to make for everybody to go home with, I grew up under this statement here, is each one teach one. That's the only way we're going to turn things around. We got to start sharing what we have amongst ourselves to make it a better society for all people. You know, black people want their share, but I think the greatest emphasis is we want to have a better society where we can all get along and do what we can do to make this planet as best as possible, because those that was before us, everybody see the state of what's happening right now with global warming and sewage and smog, and they didn't get it right. As Sonny said, for all you youngsters in here, it's your time to step up and make it right. So remember, each one teach one, fight the power, because there's going to be people out there that try and suppress you and hold you back from what you know is the right thing to do. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists.